Welcome back. I was just out doing a little shopping. Looks like we're all set and ready to go for the second in my series, So Very Scary. I'm Lady Delatois. This is my studio. Welcome to Building Steam, the channel where we talk about making cosplay, sewing, foam crafting, and all kinds of geeky stuff like that. If you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get right into it. This is my second installment in the series So Very Scary, which is designed to help the beginning sewer tackle their very first sewing project. In the first installment, I talked about the hidden pitfalls and problems of acquiring all of the necessary materials and tools to start your first project. In this video, I'm going to talk about what happens when you've done that, prepping your fabric, prepping your patterns, and laying out and cutting your pattern pieces. As always, before we begin, I'm going to encourage you to take your time, work slowly, and most importantly, be kind to yourself, because this is a new skill you're learning and it's going to take time to feel comfortable with it. Luckily for you, this stage includes several skills that I hope you actually already possess. Part 1. I got my fabric. Now what? You know when you're playing a video game and you run into this NPC who gives you this quest where you have to find a whole bunch of ridiculous items in order to continue on with your storyline, and you spend like the next 3 hours grinding, killing creatures, hoping that they drop the materials that you need? Yeah, you just experienced the real life version of that, so congratulations, my adventurers. You have leveled up, ready to move on. So I have my fabric. What do I have to do now? I just put my pattern pieces on it, right? And cut it. Unfortunately, not quite. A lot of sewing books are going to tell you that you should wash every single piece of fabric that you purchase. As a cosplayer, I'm not going to lie, I do not do that. If I am making something that I know is not going to get thrown in the wash because the fabric is dry clean only, or it's going to be too elaborate, I don't bother to wash the fabric. No lie. I like the way it smells when it comes from Joanne. It's like potpourri. It's my happy place. What was I talking about? Oh, fabric. So that was one of those needed skills that I hope that you already have, that you can work the washing machine. You know how it works, right? If not, there's got to be another YouTube video out there somewhere. I'm not going over that. The bag that I brought in when I first came in had a whole bunch of cotton in it, and I did indeed take that downstairs, throw it in my washing machine, and wash it up, because those are for things that I'm going to be throwing in the wash later on. I don't want it to change after I've sewn it and shrink or change color. I really need to know if it's going to react to being washed now before I make something and then it's ruined. So you've looked at the fabric that you've purchased, and you've made an intelligent determination about whether or not you need to pre-wash it. Because God knows, I'm sure you don't have enough laundry to do already. Don't cut a corner there just because you don't feel like doing another load of laundry. I usually throw it in with whatever clothes I'm washing at the time. 2 birds, 1 stone. Okay, so what next? Cutting out my pattern? No. First, I need to iron my fabric. Now, I have several different fabrics here that I'm going to show you. This is a nice knit. This one, probably not going to require much in the way of ironing. It does have some light wrinkles in it. This one is also a knit, and I very carefully looked at this one. And this is one of the rare exceptions. this is a beautiful heavy knit, and it really is not taking any wrinkle at all. There are not a whole lot of fabrics that come off the bolt that you do not have to treat in any way. Okay, how about this one? This one is a crepe back satin, and if you look at it, if you unfold it, you're going to see, where is it? You see that fold line? And all of these little wrinkles, big wrinkles, from being on the bolt. And I need to get rid of all of that before I lay out my pattern pieces, because it really will change the shape of your pattern piece. If you are putting your pattern piece down on something that is bumpy and wobbly and crunched up, and then later on you go to match up your lines with the corresponding pattern piece that next to it, the lines aren't going to match up. And that makes me crazy. Don't do it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen online people posting pictures of their work that is all wrinkly, and I don't understand how they can work that way, because you're really setting yourself up to get a substandard result. You're setting yourself up to have things not match up nicely. And I don't know why you would set that kind of a trap for yourself. It takes a few minutes to just go over the fabric with the iron and make sure that you have a beautiful smooth surface to work with. This is a cotton. It's a beautiful luxe cotton. And this one has been washed because it is a cotton. And I wanted to see how it was going to react. And now it is super, super wrinkly. So I'm going to have to iron it. So what I'm saying here is, don't be an ass, and don't take the shortcut, because in the end, it's not a shortcut. In the end, instead of losing time standing there and ironing your fabric, you're going to lose time trying to put it together when your pattern pieces don't quite match. So I frankly would rather lose time standing over a hot iron. And let me tell you, I hate ironing. I hate it. I hate it. It's awful. But in this instance, I definitely go ahead and iron all of my fabrics before I start. Okay? So before we move on to the next section where we're talking about cutting out the pattern, because we are almost there, I do just want to say a couple things about fabric itself. So the fabric has two edges. It has the edges that was on either side of the fabric, of the width of the fabric, all along the length of the fabric. And this is called the selvage. See if I can find one that's a little more clear. Okay, so there is the selvage. Okay, so that goes along the length of the fabric. And then the other side here, this way, this is where they cut it. All right. So when we are cutting out our pattern pieces, we are lining them up with the selvage. So it's important to know where the selvage of your pattern, of your fabric, what that means. So that's what that is. Also, fabric has a wrong side and a right side. And sometimes it's super clear. Wrong side. Right side. Totally easy. Totally got that. But this one, this knit, we have side and side. So maybe you picked a fabric where it's super, super clear, which is the right side and which is the wrong side, and you don't have to worry about it. But maybe you picked one where you're just really not sure. There are a couple ways to tell if you're concerned about it. Well, one way anyway. So fabrics generally have this sort of row of holes along the selvage. And if you run your fingers along the holes, you can feel that on the right side, the holes are, it's like where it poked through. So it sticks out onto the right side and is flat on the wrong side. So that's one way that you can tell. And if it's something like this that really doesn't appear to have a selvage, I would just need to decide which one I was choosing as my wrong side and which one I was choosing as my right side. And I would mark each pattern piece on the wrong side so that I don't screw up later on and end up with two right sides of my body by sewing together something the wrong way. So sometimes you just have to make that determination. And sometimes maybe you like the wrong side of the fabric more than you like the right side of the fabric. There's no rules. You can do whatever you want. You can sew the wrong side out to the front if that's what you want to do. Do you, man. Whatever. You can look like you're inside out the whole time. That's fine. All right. So we've talked about our fabric. We've talked about how we prep our fabric. And I think it's time that we move on to part 2. Yay! I get to cut my pattern. Woo! This is the pattern that I'm going to be working with today. I would like to say that in the first installment of this series, I recommended that you purchase a skirt pattern as an easy first project. And upon reconsideration, I thought that that was super, super gendered. And so also, if you don't want to make a skirt, you can make pajama pants. That's a really simple pull-on garment that is easy to make. So that's my recommendation there. So I'm finally going to tell you to go into your pattern envelope and take out the contents. And you're going to find these 2 lovely packets of papers that are nice and tidy and compact. Enjoy this moment because it's never going to go back this way again. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open up these construction instructions, which is the heavier paper. The lighter paper is the pattern pieces itself. And on the very first page, it is going to have a picture of the possible finished styles. And it's going to have a picture of all of the different pattern pieces and their numbers. And underneath that, with the numbers corresponding, it has the what each piece is called and for which style that it goes to. For instance, this one, piece number 1, front and back A and B. So that would be the front and back of the skirt. But I don't need those pieces because I am making the pants. So I need piece 3, piece 4, piece 7, piece 9, piece 10 to start this project. Sometimes we use the same pattern piece for multiple styles. For instance, piece 3, yoke, front and back, is for every single style in this pattern. So I would need that piece for every single style. Okay, there's also going to be, if you go down, there's going to be a place where it says cutting layouts. And it has a little diagram where it says pattern piece printed side down and pattern piece printed side up. And that's going to let you know down in these pictures of the pattern layouts which way the pattern piece is facing. Does that matter? Sometimes. If you end up having to cut multiple pieces of a single pattern piece and it's supposed to be flipped over and you don't flip it over, you could end up with too many for one side and not enough for the other. So it can matter. In the beginning, you really want to look at your pattern layouts and follow your pattern layouts pretty faithfully because that's going to teach you how this works. So I looked at my construction instructions and I picked out which style I was using and I picked out which pattern pieces I would need. Now I'm ready to cut my pattern. So I do recommend that you have cleared out enough space that you can lay this out to cut out your pattern pieces. Make sure that your cat or your dog can't walk across your project and rip your paper because this does rip pretty easily. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff right there. Once you have your pattern paper laid out, you are going to find the line that corresponds with your size, and you're going to cut along that line. I usually cut to the outside of the line just a little bit. There are going to be places where your size lines tend to merge together a little bit, and you're just going to look ahead to see where your line emerges, to see whether you need to cut to the inside or the outside of that group of merged lines. I am using paper scissors to cut my paper pattern out. Some people use their fabric scissors and say that it does not affect them in any way. I just tend to be a little bit neurotic about it. When you are cutting either your paper pattern or your fabric, you do want to try to use nice long strokes so that you don't end up with jagged edges. As you cut your pattern, you're going to notice different symbols on it. Each pattern piece is labeled with the number of the pattern piece, and it will say underneath, cut 2 of fabric, cut 2 of lining, cut 2 of interfacing, or just maybe cut 2 of fabric. You will also notice different shapes and markings. The most important one for you right now is the long arrow that runs the length of the pattern piece. This arrow shows you how to lay the pattern piece in relation to the grain line. When we are laying out our pattern pieces on the fabric, we will discuss this a little more in depth. There will be different circles and triangles that indicate places where your pieces join up together, and different construction markings. The triangles on the line that you are currently cutting out are called the notches, and these are the places where we are matching our pattern pieces together. You do not need to do anything with these right now. You will mark these out when you are cutting your fabric. So let's just go ahead and cut out the rest of our pattern pieces. Okay, yay! We cut out our pattern. We must be ready to marry the pattern pieces and the fabric pieces together so that we can finally get to making the thing. Well, almost. There is one more thing that I would suggest that you do, and that is pull out your ironing board and iron your pattern pieces. Make sure that the steam is turned off so that you don't get water all over your paper, because that makes it not so great. And just run the iron over it. Takes a couple of seconds to flatten out your pattern pieces, and then they're beautiful and smooth and easy to work with. Again, it's about taking time now to save yourself time later. Do it right, work methodically, correctly, and slowly. I think we're ready to lay out those pattern pieces. Yay! I've moved over to my cutting table now where I have my fabric all laid out. So this may not be quite as even a shot as it is when I'm sitting at my desk. Do the best that I can here. I really do need to get another camera that angles down and points at my sewing table, but I don't have that set up yet, so my apologies. And I have my fabric folded in half with the side that I chose to be the wrong side facing out. The selvage is up here, draped over this end, and the fold is down here on this end. Okay, this is how that the pattern layout tells me I need to have my fabric laid out. Selvage is up at the top, fold down at the bottom. Now remember when I was cutting out the pattern pieces, and I was talking about the different symbols that are on the pattern pieces of this very important arrow that denotes how you lay the pattern piece in relation to the grain line. You want to take this arrow and it has to match up with the selvage. The grain line goes this way, mirroring the selvage, and we also have threads that go this way. So we have the warp and the woof, some that go this way, some that go this way. And we generally lie out our pattern pieces on our fabric so that the arrow is lining up with the selvage. If I was doing something that I was cutting it on the bias, the arrow would still be lining up with the selvage, but the piece itself would be diagonal. and the arrow would be going this way. Okay, cutting things on the bias really creates beautiful drape and flow in things like skirts or dresses, or it also, you can cut things on the bias to get binding that does not fray so easily. So there are two choices here. For A, sizes 4, 6, 8, 10, and for B, sizes 12 and 14. I am making size 14, so I guess I am picking this one here. And so this one says that I should have piece 3. So I need these pieces, 9, 10, 7, and 3, and it will tell you over here where where it says the D pants, it tells you exactly underneath which pattern pieces you need. So you can also go to that to figure out which pattern pieces you need to cut out, just FYI. So I need to take piece 3 and I need to lay it out this way here. And I need to take, these pants are going to be really hideous, by the way. I was just looking for an easy knit that was cheap to make these pants, and I had this sitting in my stash. So they may be hideous, and I'm okay with that. Piece 9 goes at the top with the crotch here facing down. I'm trying to make sure that my stripe is even as possible. It's a little hard because this is a really loose, stretchy knit, so I'm not that worried about it because I don't care if they're hideous pants. Piece 10 goes here. This one goes this way. All right, so I'm making sure that my pattern pieces are not touching each other. There's a little bit of space in between. I'm making sure that my grain lines, my arrow for my grain line, see, that was not quite right. That was a little crooked. And consequently, my arrows would have been a little crooked. My stripes, rather. Now, this is just a little tip from me to you. I lay out my pattern pieces just on the fabric first before I start pinning them. I want to see if they fit properly. I probably will need to finagle them a little bit. Maybe I'm going to end up moving something someplace else. This is a very simple pattern. It doesn't have a lot of pieces, and I have quite a bit of fabric. If I was doing something where I was not sure if my pattern pieces were all going to fit on my fabric, I might need more than one try to get it all lined up correctly. However, I think this is probably pretty good. My arrows look pretty straight, so I think I can start to pin these down. Some people prefer to use pattern weights rather than pins. I do occasionally use pattern weights, especially if I'm working with small pieces like corsets and stuff. Pattern weights can be anything that is small enough to hold down the pattern piece without getting in your way, and heavy enough to keep it from moving. So I use whatever's sitting around my shop as pattern weights, I'm not gonna lie. When I am pinning my pieces down, I'm trying to make sure that it stays nice and straight, and I pin along the edge. I don't pin out because then I'm not going to be able to cut it. I like to make sure that I pin down each corner and one in the center of any long side. I'm just going to go ahead and pin the rest of these down. Well, I've laid out all of my pieces and I've got them all pinned down. And we have reached the point where we are actually in the moment that is so very scary, because it's the point of no return. Once you put the blade to the fabric, that's kind of it. So you might want to take a moment to glance over what you've done. Make sure that you feel confident in the straightness of your pieces. If you picked something that has a pattern, you're going to want to make sure that the pattern is all going the same way. Pattern matching itself is a skill that takes time and patience to learn. I'm still working at it. If you want to look at somebody who has impeccable pattern matching, you should check out Redfield Designs. She just does an incredible job matching her patterns. It's amazing. So just as a note. All right, so we have done it. I've laid it out. I've taken a deep breath, and I'm ready to start cutting. I have my fabric scissors and I have my rotary tool. You may not have a rotary tool because you do need to have a mat. I didn't have a rotary tool when I first started. I only had my fabric scissors. When I am cutting, I want to make sure that I am using long, smooth strokes and not a bunch of little tiny strokes. So I really want to open them all the way and cut for the length of the blade before I move on. So I'm going to cut this piece out here. And opening my blade up the whole way, I'm going to do it. And a nice smooth cut the length of my blade. Now, some people, when they are cutting, when they come to the marking on the pattern where it has the little triangle, that's called a notch. Some people cut their notches out into the fabric. So they cut along and they make a little triangle that goes out. That is not how my mama taught me to do it. And so that is not how I do it. That seems really labor intensive to me. What I do is I cut my notches inward. And I'm not sorry. But it's a personal preference. If you would rather have the notch sticking out, certainly if you go too far cutting your notch in, then you can cut into your fabric past the seam line and have a little, cut in your fabric. So you do want to be careful when you are cutting out those notches. So I have a notch here. I'm just going to make a little snip. Bink. And I'm going to make a little snip here. Bink. Sound effects not required. I'm going to make 2 notches here. Bink. And bink. Okay. So I cut out my notches and I'm going to take another second and look at the pattern piece and see if there's any other markings that I need to put on it before I am finished with this piece. And there are not. There is a line down the center. It's a dotted line that says center front. And I just put a pin there to mark where that is. If you want to mark that line out, I certainly recommend it. I have never been sorry that I marked out a pattern, that I marked everything that needed to be marked. I have been sorry for not marking things. So it's generally better to do more marking than not. What can we use to mark our fabric? I have tailor's chalk, which I use a lot. This fabric, I think I would have to use tailor's chalk on. This fabric isn't going to really be very cooperative with making marks, so I would use the tailor's chalk for that. I have blue and I have white. I have a fabric marker which washes out. You can get ones that wash out, you can get ones that fade. I had one that faded and I did all of my markings, and then the next day I went back and my markings were gone. So that's not so great. The other thing about the markers is sometimes they're supposed to wash out and they don't. And that's infuriating when they just keep showing back up. So You might want to test that out before you use it. I also have wax-free tracing paper. This is paper that has color on one side, and it's like waxy and chalky. And you put that down. If I was going to mark this center line, I would put it underneath the pattern piece. And I have a tracing wheel. It's a little wheel with little knobs on it. And then I would just run it along. Dun, 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 dun. And it would mark the fabric. Then I would have to flip it over and do it on the other side to get the other pattern piece. So that is one piece cut out, notched and marked. I'm going to go ahead and cut the other ones out. I'm going to use my rotary cutter because I'm not into self-punishment. Did it! I'm so proud of you. We've gotten through cutting out all of your pattern pieces. Now the next thing to do is get your sewing machine set up and get sewing these pieces together. We have finally finished all of our prep work. I wouldn't lie to you. Yay, it's finally over. And it's also time for me to finally end this video. I hope this has provided you with some interesting and useful information to aid you in your quest to finish a usable, wearable, beautiful garment. If you've enjoyed this video, I hope that you'll give it a like and also hit that bell button to subscribe to our channel so that you get notifications when the next video comes out, where I'm talking about what patterns say versus what they really mean. And also just basics about sewing together these pieces that we so laboriously cut out. In the meantime, I hope that life treats you good. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.